The air was thick with the stench of damp wood and despair as Clara knelt in the corner of the tiny, windowless room, her trembling hands clutching the frayed hem of her dress. Her sobs echoed off the peeling walls, a haunting melody of grief and captivity. It had been 3 months since her husband, Daniel, was laid to rest, and 3 months since her in-laws, driven by greed and a twisted sense of entitlement, locked her away in this prison within their sprawling estate. They wanted the inheritance Daniel had left her, a modest fortune that could secure her future. But to them, Clara was no longer a grieving widow, she was a threat, a barrier to their wealth. Her beauty, once a source of pride, now felt like a curse, a reminder of the life she'd lost and the cruelty she now endured. Clara's days blurred into a haze of hunger and fear. The room, barely large enough for a thin mattress and a rickety chair, was her world now. Her mother-in-law, Margaret, a woman with a heart as cold as the iron key she carried, visited daily to demand Clara sign over the inheritance. "You're nothing without Daniel," Margaret would hiss, her eyes glinting with malice. "Sign it, or you'll rot here." Clara refused, clinging to the memory of Daniel's love, his gentle voice promising her a life of freedom and joy. But each refusal brought harsher punishments, less food, colder nights, and the constant threat of violence from her brother-in-law, Victor, whose temper flared like a wildfire. The bruises on her arms ached, a testament to his rage, and the isolation gnawed at her spirit, threatening to break her. Meanwhile, miles away, a man named Jonah rode through the dusty trails of the countryside, his horse's hooves kicking up clouds of earth. Jonah was an outlaw, a figure whispered about in taverns and feared by the law. But beneath his rugged exterior, scarred hands, a weathered hat, and a pistol at his hip, lay a heart shaped by loss. Years ago, he'd watched his own sister suffer at the hands of an abusive husband, powerless to save her before she succumbed to despair. That pain drove him to a life outside the law, not for greed, but to help those the world had abandoned. Rumors of a beautiful widow trapped by her in-laws had reached him, carried by a sympathetic maid who'd fled the estate. Jonah's jaw tightened as he spurred his horse toward the sprawling house, a flicker of hope igniting in his chest. He'd free her, or die trying. Back in her prison, Clara's hope was fading. The walls seemed to close in, and the silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional creak of the house or Victor's drunken shouts. One night, as rain pounded the roof, Margaret stormed in, a pen and paper in hand. "Sign it now, or Victor will make you wish you had," she spat. Clara's hands shook, her eyes brimming with tears, but she whispered, "No." The slap came swift and sharp, sending her sprawling to the floor. Victor loomed in the doorway, his fists clenched, ready to enforce his mother's will. Clara braced herself, her heart pounding, when a crash echoed through the house, a window shattering, boots thudding against wood. Chaos erupted as a figure burst into the room, a man with a steely gaze and a gun drawn. "Step away from her," Jonah growled, his voice low and dangerous. Margaret and Victor froze, stunned by the intruder. Jonah's presence filled the room, a beacon of defiance against their cruelty. He glanced at Clara, her tear-streaked face and wide, fearful eyes stirring something deep within him. "You're safe now," he said softly, his tone a lifeline in her storm. But the challenge was far from over. Victor lunged, a knife glinting in his hand, and Jonah reacted with lightning speed, disarming him with a swift blow. Margaret screamed, hurling threats and curses, but Jonah ignored her, helping Clara to her feet. Her legs wobbled, weakened by months of confinement, and she clung to his arm, her heart racing with a mix of fear and hope. "We need to move," Jonah urged, guiding her toward the door as shouts and footsteps echoed from the rest of the house. The escape was a gauntlet of danger. Servants loyal to Margaret chased them through the dark corridors, their lanterns casting eerie shadows. Jonah led Clara with steady resolve, his hand firm yet gentle on hers. They dodged a swinging club, ducked through a side door, and stumbled into the rain-soaked night. The storm raged, mud slicking their path as they ran toward Jonah's horse, tethered in the trees. But the challenges multiplied. Victor, relentless and furious, rallied the household, and soon, dogs bayed in the distance, their howls cutting through the thunder. Clara's strength faltered, her breath ragged, and Jonah paused, shielding her from the rain. "I can't. I'm too weak," she gasped, tears mixing with the downpour. Jonah knelt, his eyes locking with hers. "You're stronger than they made you believe." "I've got you," he said, his voice steady, reigniting a spark within her. With renewed determination, Clara climbed onto the horse, Jonah behind her, his arms a protective shield as they galloped into the night.
The dogs closed in, their barks growing louder, and arrows of rain stung their faces.
Jonah veered off the main road, navigating a treacherous forest path, branches clawing at them. A fallen log loomed ahead, a near-impossible obstacle, but Jonah urged the horse forward, and they cleared it in a heart-stopping leap. Clara's pulse raced, adrenaline drowning her exhaustion, but safety remained elusive. Victor and his men pursued on horseback, their shouts growing closer.
Jonah knew they couldn't outrun them forever. He spotted an abandoned barn, its roof sagging but offering cover.
"Hold on," he whispered, guiding the horse inside. In the barn, they crouched in the shadows, the scent of hay and decay heavy around them. Clara's breathing was shallow, her body trembling from cold and fear. Jonah pressed a finger to his lips, his eyes scanning the darkness as hooves thundered past.
Minutes stretched like hours, the tension unbearable, until the sounds faded. Clara exhaled, her gaze meeting Jonah's.
"Why are you doing this?" she whispered, her voice raw.
Jonah hesitated, then spoke, his words heavy with emotion.
"I couldn't save my sister from a fate like yours. I won't let them take your life, too." His confession hung between them, a bridge of shared pain, and Clara felt a warmth she hadn't known since Daniel's death, but the reprieve was short-lived. Victor's voice pierced the night, closer than before, and Jonah knew they'd been tracked.
The final challenge loomed, outrunning a man driven by greed and vengeance. Jonah helped Clara back onto the horse, their bond unspoken but growing.
As they burst from the barn, Victor's men were upon them, a chaotic clash of hooves and shouts. Jonah fired warning shots, his aim precise, scattering the pursuers. The rain eased, revealing a faint dawn on the horizon, and Jonah pushed the horse to its limits, the promise of freedom driving them forward. Clara clung to him, her fear giving way to resolve. She wouldn't be a victim anymore. Miles later, the pursuit faded, and they reached a quiet valley, the morning sun painting the sky in hues of hope.
Jonah slowed the horse, and Clara slid to the ground, her legs shaky but her spirit unbroken.
They faced each other, breathless and alive. "You're free now," Jonah said, his voice thick with emotion. Clara's eyes welled as she stepped closer, her hand resting on his. "I was lost, but you gave me a chance to live again," she said, her gratitude a quiet force. Jonah nodded, a rare smile breaking through his rugged facade. He'd leave her with a trusted friend, a widow who'd shelter her, but the weight of their journey lingered, a connection forged in courage and compassion. Clara watched Jonah ride away, his silhouette fading against the sunrise. She was free to reclaim her life, her inheritance, and her strength. The road ahead would be hard, rebuilding after such loss and trauma, but she carried a new truth: kindness could bloom in the darkest places, and mercy could come from the most unlikely heroes. For every soul still trapped, she vowed to be a light, just as Jonah had been for her, a testament to the power of resilience and the hope that even in our bleakest moments, someone, somewhere, might ride through the storm to set us free.